Hi, Bert-Jan. Welcome to the Want to Taste podcast webinar talks. Want to Taste talks food ingredients. Today we're talking specifically about sustainability, something that is very familiar to you. Maybe it's good for our listeners that you give a brief introduction of yourself and Profound, your company that you run.
Yes, my company is Profound. We started some 30 years ago, Jasper. And we started as a company that was dealing a lot with supply chain scenarios, and in particular in a biodiversity context. So we worked a lot with producers and suppliers, small suppliers, I should say, from tropical forests. Looking at overcoming logistical issues, that means adding value to the products and lowering the volumes in order to also be logistically feasible. Economically as well, of course.
Yeah, so it's interesting because we also had an interview with Monique from Solidaridad. She was talking about her 30 years of experience. Now we have another 30 years of experience, and I think I can conclude both of you. And you mentioned that to me in earlier meetings that actually you didn't succeed in getting the right impact in the end, but also the momentum is also now, I think.
True to some extent, yes, but I think if you look over time, what happened is that if you look at Solidaridad, but also Fair Trade as an organization, they have moved much in the supplier scenarios, increasing volume with producers and fair trading. We, over time, have become more and more involved with companies. We've been doing a lot of work on a, let's say, slightly private sector level approach to see how we can help buyers in markets getting to the right supplies. And at some point, of course, you again meet organizations like Solidaridad and Fair Trade when it comes to how to organize the trade sustainably and fair. But at the other hand, there's always been a tension between what buyers are looking for and what suppliers are offering. And I think we've always been working at that interface up to the levels where we dealt a lot with trade formulas for trade promotion organizations like CBI in the Netherlands, SIPO in Switzerland. I've been advising also UNCTAD biotrade on setting up biotrade scenarios at let's say national levels, and then working with companies that want to engage with biotrade being then the interface between biodiversity and trade, of course.
Yeah. So what do you see are the main challenges today in supply security? You also hear sounds about greenwashing and those kind of things.
So the issues are still very much the same, I should say. But the landscape has changed enormously, where you've seen that over time, let's say, corporate private sector has been looking for more and more volume. We've always been, let's say, been challenged to work with suppliers that work with unique products, more at, let's say, the supply scenarios that are less scalable. I think you and I discussed that. There's scalable models and there's unscalable models. Yeah. And there's always been a tension between the bigger buyers and the smaller buyers with specialty products. And that's where we engage. We work more with the specialty products. This is also, of course, when you then look at the changing landscape, it's in twofold. One is the companies, let's say the competition has grown enormously. If you look at global trade, how it has grown over the past 20, 30 years, that's enormous. And hence the demand for, let's say, also the unique products has also substantially increased. So there's an enormous tension. At the same time, you see the whole issue of climate changes. And climate changes, I'm talking about plural because it has enormous effects in the countries where we are sourcing. And that also changes their landscape. There's been droughts, there's been floodings, etc. That is an enormous, let's say, burden when you talk about sustainable supply scenarios. So what we are trying to do is to, in this mounting pressure of competition, to try and see how you can build with your suppliers sustainable supply scenario that is interesting for particular buyers. And that's what we do. But I must say, it's become more of a challenge. At the other hand, you could also say that we've just passed 2-3 years of COVID. And what has happened in that period is that you see an enormous change in the way we do the business. And whereas before we would travel a lot to the countries, then work with the suppliers, then we would go to trade fairs, the classical model, then we would engage with the buyers at the trade fairs and in between, of course. But that was the traditional pattern. Over COVID, what we've seen is that our business model has also changed a lot, in a sense that we work more online, we do more online trainings, we do more online contacts between suppliers and buyers. And we've discussed this several times, how that works, also with your platform. It's not easy, because I'm a people's person. I like to engage with people. Online working is quite different, but it has to happen also to reduce our own carbon footprint. Now, that same principle offers a potential. And this is what you see at the supply side, but also at the buyer side. Buyers have become more and more aware that consumers are demanding more insight, more clarity, more transparency in the supply chains. And they are also asking to help producers getting into sustainable supply scenario. The most recent, let's say, fashion in that way is of course regenerative. We talked about that. Regenerative then meaning that whatever you source has to be replenished and more. It means that we have to deal with soil and water systems in the countries where we are sourcing, whether that be in agroforestry context, in a forestry context, or even in an agricultural context. And that's the same challenges that we see in the Netherlands as well. How do you help farmers to get into a more sustainable model? And they call that now regenerative. But of course, in our early experiences when we started, when we talked about organic was much the same. And then the fundamental question is, of course, why is what we call organic never become mainstream in the market? And I think that same challenge is currently when we talk about regenerative. How do you make it more mainstream for buyers and for consumers? It also means it has a pressure on pricing, of course.
And what do you think is the biggest hurdle why it's not mainstream yet?
Who pays the price? I think that's the challenge, because if you talk about regenerative or organic as it was meant to be, or agroecology as also people refer to, let's say, sustainable supply, it means that you have to invest in models. And this is, I think you and I recently, we were traveling in the Philippines, where we talked a lot with a number of companies on regenerative supply scenarios. Now, who will be investing in helping the suppliers, the producers, to change their models into more regenerative systems? That's costly. It's not a cost that the buyers will take upfront. It's where you can ask buyers to co-invest in models. And that's where we are at the moment, that we try and look for buyers that want to co-invest in changing the models. But what we can learn from the past is that we have to work on a bigger scale than what we did before. And the interesting fact now is that the regenerative models offer that opportunity more than before, because we can merge, let's say, the volume production, like with, we have the example from the Philippines where we talk about coconut products. There's a lot of products that you can make from coconut. At the same time, you can, up to the level of the shells, you can use the shells to making high value charcoal for shisha or for barbecues. And that's what we are helping to invest in. So it's already a kind of circular model in that sense. But you can also do intercropping. So you can do, and that's what we talked about, like with turmeric and ginger and so many other products that you can do at the same time. But on the business model, it's a different model. Rather than you look at the mono value chain, you look at a multiple value chain, where you look into multiple products that are sourced at the same time, but have different seasonalities, different requirements when it comes to the growing, the harvesting, the post-harvest treatment, etc. So how do you organize these models? But the interesting fact is that when you talk about agroforestry models, it offers a very interesting model economically. And this is, I think, what we are currently trying to set up.
I think we need another hour, Bert-Jan.
Yes, definitely.
I'm really sorry to cut you short because and we will do more about this. I'm sure in future podcasts. I think this is a subject that you cannot grasp in a couple of minutes.
Sure.
But thanks very much for at least creating the landscape in which you are operating and how you are helping sustainable and regenerative ingredients go to the market and the difficulties around that. But for sure, Bert-Jan, there will be a follow-up on this. But for now, I need to close it. Thank you so much for taking the time today to
maybe also
share.
a note from my side to thank you for engaging in this type of discussions and debate about how do you set up these models? How do you change the models? Because I think that's also where we are looking forward to see and engage with Want to Taste to see how you create such multi-product models. Yeah. Thank you.